But what we're going to do is talk about the scientific literature. So basically, you have all these people studying things, doing experiments, validating their hypotheses. It's only useful if other people know about it. So a big part of the scientific endeavor is sharing your information with other people so everybody can kind of build off each other and work together to build a larger view of everything. There are different types of scientific writing, and it's worth really thinking about them and where you find them, how reliable they are. So let's talk about this. Primary references. So primary references, these are the most reliable. These are written by the scientists who did the work. So it's not somebody saying scientists have found. This is like, we did the experiment. Here is our data. Here are our conclusions. So you can take a look at our data and see if you agree with our conclusions. Usually in peer-reviewed journals. So peer-reviewed means that other scientists read your work before it gets published. So I write some paper, like, I've been continuing doing this analysis of this brain imaging data for this MDMA study. At some point, I'll have all my analysis done. I'll write it up. I will send it in to a journal, and they will send it to other scientists who will look at that and will say, like, this looks good, but you need to be more clear about what you're trying to say here, or this is not controlled very well. You need to do some more experiments to control for that source of variability, or you didn't mention this other possibility and bring in these other people's work, which is relevant here, and give them credit, or whatever. But peer-reviewed means you've got other experts in the field looking at your work and giving you feedback. When you submit a research article to a journal, it never gets published immediately. It always gets sent back. It could be sent back asking for revisions, like, we'd like you to do these things to actually make it stronger. Sometimes it just gets flat out like, this is weak. Or sometimes it's not appropriate for our audience, or things like that. So primary references, usually these are in these specialized journals like called Cell or Hearing Research or Gastroenterology or something. They're usually very specialized. They're often difficult to understand what the heck they're about unless you're familiar with the field, because they get into a lot of nitty-gritty details. I should mention, just because it is a primary reference doesn't, and I'm saying most reliable, I mean most reliable in that you're getting to hear what they have to say. But a lot of times, like, we do journal clubs all the time where we analyze these papers, and sometimes they're really solid, and sometimes we look at them and it's like, this was kind of a weak experiment, or I really don't agree with their conclusions because there are sources of variability that are important that could explain their results as well. So just because it's a primary reference doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It just means that you're getting it from the horse's mouth, and you're getting kind of actual data that you can look at and decide if you agree with them. The other thing about these, this is like the first the front lines of science. And you often get people writing articles that contradict each other. Like people who do the same experiment sometimes get different results or interpret the same results in different ways. So we're going to have a homework assignment where you have to go into the literature and find primary references, trying to figure out things. You will very likely find there are contradictory studies. That's important. Like when you're saying, like, what is our current scientific understanding of something, you don't cherry pick. You can say, this is what is out there. Like there's a lot of evidence that, drinking red wine is actually healthy for your cardiovascular system. However, there's other studies that don't support this. And these other studies that are showing that the health benefits are counteracted by the detrimental effects or blah, blah, blah. So when you are looking at what's out there, try to get a good sampling of the whole picture. This is going to be important both for your little homework that's coming up and then also for your more ambitious research project, which I'll be mentioning soon. And the research project is something that you're going to be writing over the semester and presenting at the end of the semester. But it's going to depend on you going into the scientific literature and finding out what have we figured out through the scientific endeavor about the topic that you are writing about. So primary references. Let's continue. Secondary references. These are review papers. So, like I mentioned, primary references written by the scientists who did the work the most in the trenches you can get, but they tend to be harder to understand because they're very in the weeds about the topic. They also, like I said, often are contradictory, and there's often a whole lot of them. So if you're trying to read everything there is to read about some topic and what people have learned about it, it's going to be overwhelming. So these review papers are really helpful. These are written by people who are experts in the field, and they go into the weeds with the primary references and kind of summarize, this is kind of the state of the research right now. Looking at all the different studies that people have done up to this point, it seems like red wine does have benefits as evidenced in these studies, blah, blah, blah. However, there is still some debate, blah, 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 blah. It kind of helps summarize, gives you a lay of the land without having to go read, 30 obscure articles. These will be very helpful for you when you're doing both homeworks and doing your research project, because there's still something that you can trust. They're not just some random Joe Blow on a website writing something. They are usually published in scientific journals, sometimes as a special feature in a normal scientific journal, or sometimes there are actually entire journals that are just reviews, like the Trends series, Trends in Neuroscience, will just, every month they'll dive into some other subtopic and give you the lay of the land there, but in a very responsible way. So when you are trying to find these, the keyword, and you're doing your searching, review is a good keyword when you're trying to find review articles, because that's always used as a keyword in the search terms. Tertiary. So this is like textbooks. This is less reliable. Like you would not, if you are trying to support some fact or something, in general, you would rather not use a textbook. Textbook is not considered as solid as a resource. And it's because a textbook is written like, the D. Unglaub Silverthorne. She is not an expert on everything in physiology. She has her focus, but she's weak on some things and strong on other things. The other textbook, the one I was using before her, like Sherwood, she's she studies the urinary system. I would defer to her on anything about the urinary system, but I don't always totally think about other stuff in the nervous system is how I would have done it. Right. So textbooks are useful, they're good, but they're not the first place to go for the definitive information because they are written by somebody who is kind of a bit more of a jack of all trades trying to write something like this. And then beyond that, you get into the media. As much as this is after the last 4 years, I have to be so careful to like not make people like the way the media has been portrayed over the last 4 years has just been just kind of bizarre and sickening. That being said, you do want to be careful whenever you get your story from kind of mainstream media, because there is this tendency to write things in a way to, well, first of all, we talk about expertise. Usually the people writing the article really has no expertise about what they're writing. And they're also trying to write it in a way that's going to draw your attention. It is a business as well as a service providing information, but they also got to stay in business. So they, at some level, are giving the people what they want. I can, in fact, hold on, let me find, I have like a few examples that I like to bring up just actually from a long time ago, from like 20 years ago. And these are like from the San Francisco Chronicle, which I subscribe to and I like. I'm not trying to hate on the Chronicle. These are just these kind of articles that I'm going to show you could have been in anywhere. So here we go. Here, I'm going to share this. So actually, I'm dating myself. This is when I was teaching this. I was teaching this class still back in '93 already. Holy crap! So, surprising results of impotence study. So you've got this article here, and again, it's got the title in big letters, and then so people go in and they are going to like wonder what it says, and then it's like largest study of impotence has found a half of American men over 40 have experienced the problem to varying degrees. And a lot of times people, you've got a little time in your life. It's like, okay, here was what it's about. Here's the take home message. Let's move on. But if you keep going, it's like he was describing it a little bit, federally financed study in Massachusetts. And then you get to like the third paragraph. Because the survey was regional rather than national, its findings cannot be accurately extrapolated to the country. Right? And it's like the first sentence is half of American men. So this is not atypical. So you want to be careful about kind of trusting stuff like this. Here's another one. Let's see. Oh, I can't do this here. Let me clear. Oh, this one. This is a chronicle. This one here was about pot. And this was looking, pot found to be bad for middle-aged hearts. Doctors already know marijuana is bad for the heart and can be a trigger for a heart attack. Now they've determined that smoking marijuana in middle age may be even bigger risk factor. And for the first hour of smoking, first heart rate, heart attacks 5 times greater. You know, so again, you read this and you move on. But if you make it to the third paragraph, it's like risk associated is about the same as physical exercise and pretty much the same as having sex. So this could be pot as dangerous for your heart as exercise or sex. It's so again, just the way people spin things when they write them in what I do when I read something in the paper that looks really compelling or interesting, I then go and I search the scientific literature. I go back to what I'm talking about. Go find the primary reference that they're actually talking about. And what did they really say? Usually they'll, talk about the journal and the author that the study is that they're talking about. So you can get the little breadcrumbs to lead you back to the main study and then use your own judgment to see what does it really mean. Don't really trust some journalist to be an expert in science, because that's not their job. Their job is to kind of get the basic idea out there and also get your attention. So another one. Yeah, there's other ones, but we can do that later. Okay, so I guess while I've got this up here, I can go into our modules. So here, it was right before the enzyme lab. There's this module that we didn't really cover yet called Scientific Method and Scientific Literature. And again, searching the literature. This is just basically what I've been talking about. And then I mentioned this resource called Pubmed. Pubmed is kind of a wonderful, wonderful resource. Back in the day, if you wanted to find scientific studies about a particular topic, there was this huge, it was like about 50 volumes that you'd go to the library and sort through, and it was a pain in the butt. And I did so much of that. And then once you found the name of the journal article, you'd have to go down into the stacks and pull up the articles and photocopy them. And at one point they put the search engine as a computer thing where you could actually search the scientific literature through a web interface, but it was only available at fancy universities. And then at some point, the National Library of Medicine made this thing called Pubmed available for free for everybody. And it's basically a way, it's a search engine to search all the scientific papers that have been published by keyword and things like that. So I'll talk about that in a few moments in more detail, but that's going to be our main way to search the literature, is using this thing called Pubmed. When you are writing about things, because again, you're going to be using Pubmed to, in fact, here, let me just show you this. This is going to be your homework assignment here. The red wine literature search. There are claims that drinking, There are claims that drinking red wine, has beneficial effects, particularly concerning cardiovascular health. Your assignment is to investigate the scientific literature using Pubmed to see if these claims are supported by current scientific research. Can you find any peer-reviewed research that supports these claims? You should reference both primary research as well as review articles, right? So that means you're not going to do some article out of a magazine. You're not going to do something out of, health and nutrition today, or Gentleman's Quarterly, or some website that's just some random person's website. It's got to be a scientific article that you can give me its kind of pedigree. You are going to briefly summarize your conclusions and be sure to document your references, author, journal, date, using Harvard referencing system, which I'll show you in a few moments. You should have a minimum of 4 references to support your claims. This is only to get your feet wet. This is not your main research project. You're going to have a big research project, but I want everybody to get a sense of how this works. I want to be able to give everybody feedback on how they're doing it before they do the big project. If this is more than like one side of a page or something, you're doing too much. You're working too hard. If this is taking you more than an hour, you're working too hard. This should just be something where you go in. We'll talk about, do some searching and kind of summarize your findings, but document where the information comes from. It'll be due I think in a week from today. So if we go back, Harvard referencing is this way of putting the references in line. So for instance, let's say there is a paper by the Mithoffers. Here's Michael and Annie Mithofer. This is this whole big thing. Here are all the authors. Here is the title, 3,4-methylene dioxamine methamphetamine assisted psychotherapy for post-traumatic stress disorder, military veterans, firefighters, randomized double-blind, blah, 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 from the Lancet Psychiatry, volume 5, pages. So this is all of the data you need to actually find the actual article. Tells you what year it's from and who wrote it and where it's published. This would be like a line in your paper. This would be a line when if your paper was, about, what is the current status of psychedelic drugs in therapy. One of your sentences might say, MDMA administered along with psychotherapy controlled settings have been shown to be effective at reducing post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms in veterans and first responders. And how do we know? Where's that from? It says Mithofer et al. Et al. Just means and others, 2018. And here is going to be a list of references at the end of your little paper, where then I could go and say, oh, there's the Mithofer 2018. Here's the more complete reference. Right? So anytime you say something that is not just common knowledge, if you say antioxidants in red wine help reduce the risk of heart attack, you can't just say that. You have to say according to who. You could, it might be, in parentheses, antioxidants in red wine reduce the risk of heart attack, and then in parentheses, Garrett and Guastella, 2021. And then later at the end, you'd see the reference to their paper where they did some research, supporting that statement. Right? I have Garrett and Guastella are right up in front of me in order here. So, and it rolls off the tongue nice. So does that make sense? Yeah. So what time is it? 12. So let me just briefly kind of show you how PubMed works. So there's lots of ways to get into it. If you just search for it, you can find it. PubMed. So again, it's from the National Library of Medicine, National Center for Biotechnology Information. 32 million citations from the biomedical literature, from Medline, life science journals, and online books. It's from a bigger thing. If we go, there are all these different databases. There's databases on protein structures, on different genes from any kind of animal you can find, anybody that's mapped things out. There's all sorts of really cool things that the government has actually facilitated to help people keep track of the mind-boggling amount of information we've been amassing about everything from genetics to proteins to enzymes to this and that. Again, the thing that we are going to use is PubMed. So let's get back into PubMed. There are resources. Where's PubMed? Oh, whatever. Okay. So then you type in keywords. It's like Google, except the keywords can be a little trickier to figure out because a lot of times you have not had experience in a particular subject. Or what I often do is I start using keywords that make sense to me. And as I start finding articles, I often see the words that the people in that field use. And then you can start using those words. Like, if you were going to like study, like, if I'm wondering like about how do people keep things fair in the workplace and in education. And I start seeing everybody uses the word equity. It's like, oh my God, I better use that word in my search because that's going to pull up what I really want. So that it works like that a lot of times. There's some buzzword that is really common in a particular field that will pull up the kind of stuff you're looking for, but you just don't know it yet. So, but as you start digging around, you start finding those words. So let's say I wanted, like last time people had to figure out, like, does Red Bull give you wings? Is there any evidence that actually drinking Red Bull is going to improve your performance? So we could type like energy drink, and I don't know, performance. Why not just start with some? I'm probably going to have to learn how to focus my keywords, but start wherever you think you can and then try to focus them in. And what happens is I start getting these articles, and I have, actually, we're not. Well, I think they must have just redid their. Usually there's thing on the side that tells you places that it's been quoted and stuff. But what I do is I read the titles. The first thing you do is read the titles because it's going to pull up stuff you want probably and stuff you don't want. So I go here and I say, oh, performance effects of energy drink on cognitive and physical performance in elite leagues. I don't know what League of Legends is. It's probably some kind of video game or something. Does anybody know what that is?
It's a video game.
Okay. So what I can do then is I click on this and then I get the abstract. So for the most part, you are only going to need the abstract. The abstract is the paper in a nutshell, what they were trying to do, how they did it, what they found, what they think it means. Later on, you're probably going to want to read full papers if you're doing your major research project. For this red wine assignment, you should not read any major paper. You should just look at the abstracts. The abstract's going to give you the kind of in a nutshell what the study found. And then we can read to examine the cognitive physical effects. So we see this as their objective is to examine the cognitive and physical changes, dependent variable associated with consuming energy drink, independent variable. And then we can take a look. We observe no significant. Our findings suggest that elite e-sport athletes do not demonstrate a mental or physical improvement of performance relevant to the treatment. So they're saying that for these e-sports, is it a sport? It's called e-sports if you're just sitting doing a video game? Wow. So they're saying it's not giving you wings if you're playing a video game. If we continue looking here, this one looks good too. Effects of energy drink on short-term maximal performance reaction time. We click on here. And we say, they're looking at caffeine-containing energy drink, performance, reaction time, mood, performance on what? We could take a look a little later. So visual reaction time, hand grip force, Wingate. Wingate, I think, is on a bike. So then they go here, and what they find is we conclude that the RB, Red Bull, it's Red Bull, has a positive effect on physical performance and reaction times, right? So they found, like, when they looked at their stuff, Red Bull helped. This is why you can't just look at, in fact, the story, it might be Red Bull helps if you're on a bike, but it doesn't help so much if you're in front of a computer. So there's another article. We continue and we look at risk assessment of energy drinks with focus on cardiovascular parameters and energy drink. This, we're not worried about risk assessment. We're worried more just, does it help you out if in performance? So let's keep going. Cow's milk as a post-exercise recovery drink. It's like, that's not what I'm interested. So what you need to do is you need to scan and find the ones that look like they're interesting, and then click on that. And then you can get, in a nutshell, here they're looking at Red Bull versus volleyball. And they're saying, like, it might be, this one's might be helpful for, in your paper on red wine, you're going to look at similar things about red wine and cardiovascular health. And you'll be able to say, these people found this, they did this, they looked at this, and this was their conclusions. And so does this give you a sense of how this works? And this is really helpful, not just for a homework assignment, but in general. You're reading something and you want to decide, what is actually out there. You can go search. In terms of citations, remember I was mentioning the citation. You have to write the citations at the end after you put the little quote in the parentheses. We're using Harvard referencing. If you go to this little action cite thing here and click on it, it gives you these different formats. There is AMA, which is the American Medical Association, not what we're using. APA is not what we're using, another really common formatting. MLA, another really common one, not what we're using. This one is NLM is the one that we're going to be using. So this has the appropriate way, so then you could actually just copy that and use it. If you're in another place to look for stuff that's worth knowing about is Google Scholar. They have they're in everything of scholar.google. We could do energy drink, performance. Again, here we have perceived stress, energy, and academic performance among college students in Red Bull. This sounds great. You can look here, and again, it's another place where you can have a similar look at the abstract. When you are in Google Scholar and you want to figure out how to quote it well, there are these little quote marks you can find. Let's go back. So let's say you want to quote, you see those little quotation marks? You click on that, and here it is, the Harvard referencing system, exactly how it should look in your list of references. So that's going to make your life a little easier in making sure your references look pretty. You do not need to print out the abstracts or staple them on anything. All you need to do is reference the author and put that little reference in your list of references as a author and title and everything. So does that make sense?
Quick question, is it going to be uploaded as a PDF or Microsoft Word?
Whatever you want.
Okay. So you say it shouldn't be more than a page, less than that, half the page?
I would say the main part that you're writing shouldn't be more than one side of a page. By the time you tack on all the references, it's probably going to be 2 sides or so.
2 sides, okay.
Something around that.
Because I have issues. Once I start writing, I just don't stop. So
yeah, so
make sure like summarize everything.
Yeah, and also make sure you do summarize. Don't just have it be a list of this study found this, this study found this, this study found this. This is supposed to be you saying, people have looked at this and, it really seems such and such found this. However, another person found this, in my conclusion, blah, blah, blah. So make sure you have your voice in there and you use these studies as the way to support your narrative. Okay. I'm going to find one more thing. That looks like it. All right. So, and when you're in here, you'll probably find yourself looking for all sorts of stuff. All right. I also want to show you, I wonder if what I might do is like send out an example of kind of what something looks like with the, gosh. Hold on. All right. Let's leave this behind. All right. All right, we now are going to go and continue on. Actually, let's take a break. We've been talking a bunch, and what we need to do is we'll take a break. We'll talk about some reflex stuff and talk about some nerve stimulation stuff. So it's 11:17. So let's come back like 11:30, and we will continue. Okay. So before we leave the literature search, there's actually a couple more points. One thing I should mention is sometimes if you go into PubMed and you find some article that looks interesting and you want the full article, sometimes you can actually just get it. There's a link out where you can actually, there's a number of things that are actually free, but there are a lot of research articles that are published by these journals that charge a lot of money if you want a PDF of the article. So if at any point while you're doing your work over this semester, particularly on your research project, and you want the full text of any article, I can get that easily through my library access at Berkeley. There's no reason anybody should pay any money ever to get a scientific paper. So when you are starting to get deeper into your literature searching, you're going to definitely find that there are articles that look interesting and you'll click and it'll want like $30 for the PDF. So again, if there is something that you want and it's not accessible, sometimes if you just go into Google Scholar, they've kind of scanned the web and found some like preprint lying around or something, and you can actually snag a PDF through Google Scholar. But if you can't, just let me know, and I'm happy to, with a couple of days turnaround, give you a copy of it. The other thing is I've been alluding to this big project, which is this research project, and I realized I should just give you the basic idea of it, because I was going to actually give you the preliminary, come up with a topic actually last week. So the idea of this research project, like in non-COVID days, we actually used to come up with an actual research project where you actually came up with an objective, designed a experiment, did the experiment, got your data, analyzed the data. But obviously that's not going to happen. So instead, this is going to be more of a classic kind of term paper thing where you come up with some topic related to physiology that it's so much more fun if it's something you actually are interested in and want to learn about. And you then get to go dig deep into the scientific literature and come up with, both a written paper as well as a PowerPoint presentation, which you will present to the rest of the class. And I like people to kind of come up with different ideas, start brainstorming, and then you can just go out. It's not going to work unless there actually is research out there. So once you get an idea of what you want to work on, you have to kind of look to make sure that there is actually research that's been done on it. So you actually have real research to support your paper. Although you'd be surprised what people have looked at. Here, and if I go, I'm going to share screen. Yes, I will make sure that assignment is in your module for this week, so you don't have to find it. Here, introduction, it's right here. So I'm going to, we're up here. Okay, so I'm gonna, I will drag it. I will put it in our module for this week, so you'll be able to find it easy. Okay, so now two things left are Reflex Lab. So Reflex Lab Part 2 is very different than the first part in that there's no objective or hypothesis. There's no dependent variables. It's just going through a variety of reflexes. You should be aware of how the reflex is done, what typical responses are, and what the implications are. What are the implications of how the reflex manifests? And we'll talk about each one as we go. Although, let me look at the time again. I think in order to make sure I don't want to like run out of time, because the reflex stuff, there's stuff we're going to do, but then we could end up getting so close that I rush the nerve stimulation. So we're going to do this in just a few moments. But first, let's discuss next week's lab. Because this is not going to take that long, and we can stretch parts out if we have more time. But talking about the nerve stimulation lab, I really do want to spend a few moments making sure we're as clear as possible so you're not confused. And also, I want to make sure I'm not rushing, because then I always feel kind of guilty if it's like, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, that's not the best way for you to get it.